Hi, welcome to our second Sanfilippo Speak webinar. I'm Katie Walton with the foundation, and we are so pleased to have Sanfilippo Speak, a family support webinar series that we are hosting solely to provide families and caregivers, therapists, educators, clinicians, and anyone who has children with Sanfilippo as a part of their lives, whether it's professional or personal, so that they can have helpful insights and discussion around pivotal topics that impact your life with Sanfilippo syndrome and a child with it. Our speaker for today, we have Seth Downie, who is a RESNA-certified assistive technology professional in ATP with Pediatric Mobility in South Carolina. Seth has been in the industry for 13 years, and he also has personal experience working with several Sanfilippo families. So we're very excited to have him here, bringing very specialized understanding and experience with DME and how it relates to Sanfilippo syndrome. So I will hand it off to you, Seth. Thank you for being here.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. Hi, everyone. I hope you guys are having a great day. As Ms. Katie said, I am an ATP with Pediatric Mobility Innovations. We have been around for about 10 years now and worked with several of the Sanfilippo families over these years. We go from pretty much all over the state, so we're a little bit different from some DMEs. But from that, we just work with kids. We noticed there was a lot of the DME companies were working with adults as well as kids, and we saw a little niche that was missing, and we really wanted to help the kiddos. So as well as being one of the ATPs staff, I am also one of the owners. But anyways, it's been terrific to work with the Sanfilippo families. We've done several of the ELISA runs for several years now, working with the O'Neill family, which has been terrific. Just to welcome myself and tell you a little bit about what we're going to discuss today. So what is durable medical equipment? As you can see, it is any medical device that's to be used in the home to make aid in a better quality of life. That can include anything from bathing, sleeping, walking, mobility of any sort really fits in that category. And they use that as long-term use. If there's going to be something that needs to be used for a few weeks, it's not technically considered durable medical equipment. They really want that long-term use, which most of the Sanfilippo kids would fall in that category. According to South Carolina, there's many professions that are required to do this entire process. So there's a company like myself and an ATP, as well as physician, insurance companies, depending on funding, or if the family or patient's family wanted to do a private fund is obviously okay as well. And then the patient support system. Everybody works together from the start to the finish to really find that pathway, as we always try to say, the least hard to work through that process. I will say, I know I'm talking to everybody throughout other states, and every state is different. I have worked in Georgia and a little bit in North Carolina, and those states I do know as well are significantly different. So I would recommend referring to either local team, maybe even the Sanfilippo group, or I will offer it myself again at the end. If you guys have any questions, concerns for each state requirement that is needed, they are very specific on their guidelines and what is required to go through this durable medical equipment process. So I took a little bit of time over the last few weeks or so trying to come up with a few examples that we have used in the past for some of the Sanfilippo kids. And there's a few pictures here at the bottom, which I will go over. It kind of just gave a list of some of the items, again, that we frequently use for some of the Sanfilippo kiddos. The first picture on the left there is actually the Cubby bed. That's a pretty new product. It's been around, actually came out a little bit before 2020, then kind of rebranded after the COVID shut down things as Cubby, completely enclosed with a camera system. I have several kiddos that have this bed. It is having the adjustability and complete containment of your child at night and not have to worry about them getting out, wandering around the house, things of that nature. It is a new bed to the industry, but we do quite a bit of those, as well as sleep safe beds. We do quite a bit of those as well. I did not get a picture of those, but we can talk a little bit more about that at the end. Very similar concept, completely enclosed. They don't have a camera system, is one of the biggest differences, but they still have that same mindset of security and keeping your kiddos safe during the night. First thing that I mentioned, which is actually the second picture here, which is the adaptive stroller. Those are typically designed for short distances, running into the store. We don't want anything that's super bulky and heavy and difficult to use. Something that you can keep in the trunk of the car, take out, use real quick, get everybody back in the car, throw it in the back. You guys, I'm sure a lot of the families here have ran into where a lot of the strollers that you guys buy from the stores, you run out, they don't make them large enough, they're not sturdy enough, they're not durable enough. And that's really where something like an adaptive stroller would come into effect. This would be a perfect candidate for that. The one pictured here is one of the more common ones that we like to use here in South Carolina. It's called a drag trotter. It comes with a sun canopy, which is not pictured, and a storage basket for supplies and things like that. And we try to provide equipment that's going to be useful from day one until the day of its final use, and really stand that durability test over time to make sure that everyone can get the most out of its lifespan. The activity chair here that we have listed is in the middle here, the red one. That is the Riften activity chair. That is probably one of our favorites. It is a little bulky. It's not something that a lot of families want to take with them when they travel, but for a main chair or high chair at home, it's a great unit. There's a very large tray that we typically request as well. That's not pictured, but it has what's called a spring system in the backrest. So if the kiddos like to, with rocking and things like that, this unit is specifically designed for that. And it can take repetitive daily use over years of time. And it is one of the most well-built products out there as far as DME and an activity chair. There's several models and options, which again, we can go over at the end, but it's one of our activity chairs that kind of sticks out to us that we have our most success with. And really again, we try to stand behind products that have the best success and the least repairs and least damage and things like that for you guys with the family, so you can have consistent use. The second to last picture is a car seat, which we've also used for some of our Sanfilippo kids. This one is really, a lot of your kiddos are going to outgrow the car seats that you purchase from stores. My children, they outgrow the booster seat, and then you have to go to the seat belt, which you're going to run into. Some of the kiddos are unbuckling, and I have some kiddos that are walking around the vehicles during the travel. This car seat here that I pictured is also made by Drive Medical, but it is called a Spirit APS car seat. And it does have extra side pieces and things like that was not technically designed for what we use it for. However, with the 5-point harness and then what called laterals here on the sides, it works very, very well with keeping the child in the seat and in a safe manner for traveling down the interstates to doctor appointments and things like that. I mentioned size for this car seat. This car seat starts at a minimum of 25 pounds and goes up to 130 pounds. And you can be up to 5 foot 6 inches tall. There are other models that we use, but here in South Carolina, the funding, this is really one of our go-to car seats because of the ease of use and the large range of height and weight that it can accommodate, as well as some of these features that can be added and removed depending on what the client specifically needs. The last item here, just one of our examples, is a gait trainer, which is one of the first slides that we had shown here. This one is made by Riften. Does show every accessory. This is one of the items that we try to request all of the products with almost, here in South Carolina, almost extra parts. Because you never know what you're going to need from day to day. From if one of the kiddos is having a good day on Monday and a bad day on Tuesday, you may need to take parts off and remove them or add them back. So this picture here actually demonstrates a typical small gait trainer that we would supply, depending on exactly what the child needed. That one, as the picture we saw in the very beginning, helps with ambulation, standing, really, and mostly what's most important, independence. I think it is honestly one of the most underutilized pieces of durable medical equipment, just because of kind of looks a little bit intense. There's a lot of things that you can go, and it can be slimmed down from that. This is their smaller models, but their larger models have a spring system in them. So the kiddo likes to bounce or likes to sway when they walk. That's a new system that came out with about a year ago, that when they walk, instead of a more very robotic pace of walk, we can have it do this to where it will sway when the kiddo walks. And it helps with learning ambulation and obviously ambulation being the goal for everyone. But again, these are just a few basic examples. There are several other beds, like I mentioned, the Sleep Safe bed. There's a Pediatric bed. There's a Kaiser Benton bed. There's a bed by George. And then we also have, which I didn't mention, there is a portable safety bed, which I do a good bit of, by Abrams Nation. And that is basically a small cubby bed, which is pictured here, for any of the families that travel long distances or fly and need to stay in a hotel room. If you stay in a handicap accessible hotel room, they have the rails and the large bathrooms, but they're not, if you're worried about opening doors and running out in the hallway and things like that, this safety bed attaches to a standard, depending on what size you get, attaches to a standard hotel bed and is completely contained. And we do that quite a bit as well. Something for traveling, just because at least for us and my company, we don't expect everybody to stay at home at all times. But just a few examples of things that we use for some of the Sanfilippo kids. Okay, so what do we do after we receive equipment? This is probably some of the most frequent asked questions, and I do have a slide that's next about frequent questions, but this is something that when I train some of my technicians for the repairs and things like that, that what we expect the families to do and what I want the families to do, where if you want to rely on the DME company, I'm privileged, I'm happy to help. But there's sometimes where it's a Saturday or a Sunday or you guys are on vacation and that's just not an option. So for us here in South Carolina and our company, what happens if it breaks or needs adjusting? Can you do it on your own? For us, absolutely. We think, if you had something that was very complex and disassembling something that you weren't comfortable with, no, we're happy to help. We're available by phone, Zoom, FaceTime, things like that to help. Our office is always open. But the most part, things like adjusting. I talked to Miss O'Neill a few weeks ago actually about just lowering some foot plates. Sometimes it just takes a 5 to 10 minute phone call. We can adjust foot plates over the phone, and with technology, it has made that a lot easier. A lot of the equipment that if you haven't gotten already or are in the process of getting, you can ask for if they don't come with it, but a lot of the equipment now comes with their own tools. A lot of the manufacturers have realized that now with YouTube and things like that, when everything changing with all the technology, that a lot of the families can go onto the internet and do a quick search, and there's many, many options for even disassembling a bed or lowering a footrest or tightening a wheel. Typically, that's always available, and a lot of times we'll be given the tools to do such. Next question, can I give it away or donate it? Yes. So as far as, again, here in South Carolina, once we deliver that item to the patient, and for my company's guidelines, it is the patient's. We're not in the mindset of if it's not funded by insurance and things like that, or if it's not paid on the front end. We honestly, I don't think I've ever taken any equipment back. That's just not how we do things. We believe in if that child needs that piece of equipment, they really need that equipment, and we'll have to figure it out another way. But if something does happen, doesn't need it anymore, has outgrown it, there are several groups, and I'm sure there are across the country. I do know of one on Facebook that a lot of families have told me, which is called Special Needs Swap Meet, which I believe is on Facebook, where people will post, people do sell things, but will also donate if there's pieces that aren't eligible for funding in their certain state, where people will travel to come get them. And luckily here in South Carolina, our funding is quite good for quite a few miscellaneous pieces, and I have people that will travel from other states here to pick up when they've outgrown things, just don't need them anymore, things of that nature. So yes, absolutely donating it to it. Here we have a division, part of the University of South Carolina, called the Assistive Technology Closet, and it's basically a nonprofit that will take any equipment that again is not needed and pass it on to somebody that is. And I'd recommend reaching out to any universities that have any type of physical education or maybe physical therapy group in training that can help with that, is they may have a larger outreach for getting helping you place that equipment in someone else's home. Selling it back to the company, I'm not sure about that. As far as my company, that is not something we do, just because if it was to give back to us, we would just pass that along to someone that typically does not have insurance or again cannot get funding. But again, we do have people selling some of the things when they don't need them on that Facebook group that I mentioned earlier. I have heard of several families doing that. Okay, what if I need a different piece of equipment or accessories? So there's a lot of time frame constraints with this. If we're dealing with what when we started, I consider this durable medical equipment. It's technically complex durable medical equipment. So everything that I listed as far as items would be under the complex codes. And in that category, the accessories are typically separate. So if we delivered, per se, that Rift and Activity chair, and the day that we did it, the child was doing very well, and we only needed a few of the items. And then 6 months down the line, we need to get a few more items. What would happen is we'd again have to go through that process, which I'll mention shortly. But after that process, we can add things. So it's not at least again here in South Carolina, at least for my company, it's not a one stop and that's it. So I don't want everybody to think that, again, here in South Carolina, if you call me, Seth, and we have an evaluation for 20 minutes to an hour, we talk about the ins and outs of every day, and then we forget something. It's going to happen. When I go into these families, into the homes, and we're going to talk 5, 6, 7 pieces of items, from bathing to sleeping to standing to mobility. We're going to miss something, and that happens. And so if we start that process on a Tuesday, and we get everything delivered within 60 to 90 days ish, from there, if we need something else, a lot of times I should recommend reaching out to your DME saying, I don't think this is quite right. Or if you do know what they need, hey, we're missing this item. Can you help us with that? But that is absolutely something that can be done at a later date. Needing a different piece of equipment, there are time constraints as far as insurance funding, and that is different per state. Here in South Carolina, it's technically 5 to 7, but with using kids, they grow so quick that there's not any type of equipment that I can cover that will give that amount of growth from a 5-year-old to a 13-year-old. It's just not an option when you get in that 7-8 year range, what they're asking for. But as far as if there's a medical need, at least here in South Carolina, if there's a medical need or a medical change or condition change, then we're typically okay. If we originally decided to do the cubby bed because the child was running around the home and trying to get out, and we needed to go to a low sleep safe bed, which is not enclosed, because they were unable to ambulate at that time and things of that nature, that's a change in medical status where, again, here in South Carolina, they may ask questions to make sure that this is an honest request. But if it's been over a year, 2 or 3, that's typically not an issue that we run into. How long is the equipment designed to last? Typically 5 years minimum. That's kind of what we go off of. Some of the manufacturers, which I've mentioned Sleep Safe Bed before, they have a 5-year warranty, which is terrific. We love it. We've worked with, me and my business partner have worked with them for almost 12 years now. They're based in Virginia. They have phenomenal equipment. And a lot of times it can handle that, including the Rift in and the car seat and things like that. There are extenuating circumstances. If it's sometimes the kiddos, when they really like to rock, they like to rock. And when they do, the car seats and the strollers really can't handle that because they don't have the spring system designed in it for that to happen. So technically 3 to 5 years, depending on the usage. Again, we run into sometimes for the car seats specifically, if there's a fender bender, we always recommend getting those replaced. And again, here in South Carolina, with a police report, that automatically gets approved. Want to get that replaced just to make sure that everyone's safe. Same thing with the beds. If the beds have damage to where they're not contained anymore, the cubby bed, sometimes the canopy, we've had some kiddos that would tear the canopy. Get that canopy replaced. That's typically not an issue. The Rift and Activity chair, it typically holds up quite well. The strollers, if it's used every day, every other day, if you could get 3 to 4 years out of it, is pretty great actually for that constant use. But it's really going to be dependent on what piece of equipment you guys have would determine how long really expected it to last. And it is different in every state. And a lot of what I've said in timeframes are South Carolina's Medicaid program. But if any of you families have private insurance, they're going to have their own process and timeframes that they will follow as far as guidelines, along with the secondary or state insurance if the family has that as well. Okay, this one I tried to come up with a few things. I talked to some of my staff of some of the questions that we get from start to finish from meeting you guys, meeting in the home or during physical therapy, or sometimes even at the doctor, to then either myself or a technician delivering this equipment into the home. And these are some of the ones that kind of popped up for us that we hear either most often or I would like to hear more often. So to either speed up that process or to make sure that the equipment through that process is the correct equipment for that child. So first, what equipment is best for my child? This is a loaded question. This is something that where myself and Adam as the ATPs and Daryl as part of Pediatric Mobility, we will typically go out to the home, measure the home, make sure all the doorways can accommodate whatever type of equipment that we would recommend for the child. We would then meet the child. I do prefer to work with a physical therapist to see if they have any goals, if we're working on ambulation, things like that, but to come up with as many items as possible in each range of what we're looking for. For instance, I mentioned the Ripton gait trainer earlier. That's not the only gait trainer that's available. You can do a kid walk, there's a Grillo, there's a My Way, and there's always new and improved products coming out. So I would always just be persistent on questions. And if they come in and they meet with you and they say, I think we should do this, absolutely, it's probably great. Is there any other options? Typically, yes. It'd be very, very few. Car seats are maybe a little bit limited, but beds, there are several. Strollers, there's several. Activity chairs, there's dozens. So I would always ask. And with this being a loaded question, the second part of this is where this will kind of join into the first question is, can we demo the equipment? If we're not sure, we haven't done a demo with a physical therapist or sometimes even a doctor or with a company like myself, a DME that doesn't have a demo or trial for you, the family, to try, I would absolutely ask. The vendors, the manufacturers, they have sales rep throughout the entire country who basically carry all those products. It may take a week or two to get that product specifically to fit your specific child and their needs, but I would always recommend trialing something if you're not sure. Obviously, the beds are a little bit more difficult, but seeing pictures or asking for pictures in homes or looking on social media where families have posted pictures, I would recommend for beds. But activity chairs and strollers and car seats, any type of those things, even just to see in person. When I have people come to my office, which is more often they do that now as of late, just wanting to see the item. When I have an item that's going to be delivered in a week or so, I'm like, absolutely, swing by and you can take a look. It's the different color than what you were looking for, but you can see it in person instead of the first time you see it and your child trying it being when I deliver it to the home. So that would be one of my biggest things to ask during this process is can we trial the equipment? And I would especially lean on gait trainers and or standers if that's something that's needed. Just because they're so complex, there's so many options and accessories and so many styles that you want to make sure that you're covering all of those bases before going forward through this insurance process, which can, again, last 3 to 6 months. Who can help with the proper selection of equipment? Kind of mentioned that a second ago. I would absolutely rely on physical therapists if you have one. They went to school for the physical therapy part. They did take a little bit. Here in South Carolina, they're required to have a doctorate. And having a doctorate, they did take some courses on durable medical equipment. It's typically not the kind of durable medical equipment a lot of you guys may be looking for. It'd be more of the standard wheelchairs. But a lot of the physical therapists out there working with ATPs like myself over the years would be comfortable with that equipment over the years and be able to recommend, we tried this one, or on a lot of clinics have their own products and or can get a trial from me to work with them to decide the best product for the child. Doctors sometimes here do recommend equipment. A little bit of give and take with that. They do. Obviously, the doctors they would medical school, things like that. We try to all work together. I let them cover the medical part, let me as the ATP cover the equipment part, and then let the physical therapist cover the movement part. And if we all work together, I think us three minimum, as well as the family, giving the input on what will work in the house. Because if we recommend an extra large gait trainer by Rifton that is absolutely perfect for the child, but we live in a 1-bedroom apartment, I wouldn't recommend it because it's quite large. It's about 4 feet long, 4 feet tall, and about 3 feet wide. So it's not something just because it works for myself, the physical therapist, the patient, doesn't necessarily mean it'll work in the home. What is the expected time frame to receive equipment? That varies drastically. I will say, if we had a family that just wanted a piece of equipment to order it off the internet, that's pretty quick, maybe a week or two. Called me up, wanted to order a bed, probably gonna be 2 to 3 weeks because they get them built and then they ship them to us. Here in South Carolina, our process through the state agency of Medicaid is typically 90-ish days. And that's from meeting the family in the home or at therapy, being day one, all the way through the paperwork and everything going smooth to getting the equipment ordered, confirming colors, and then getting it delivered to the house. So typically 90 days, but that does vary drastically. When I was working in Georgia a few years ago, that process was about 6 months just because they require more documentation and more processes to get through that complete approval process before things can even be ordered. So I've asked, before you start that process, feel free to reach out to any DME companies. We have people call us often asking what's the typical time frame of getting that equipment, just so you have an idea if you have a trip coming up. And to start sooner rather than later, I would absolutely suggest on most cases, just because of the paperwork that the insurance companies require. What part does insurance and the patient's physician play in the process? So first part of that would be the physician. So with the physician, they are going to be writing here in South Carolina, they're going to be writing the prescription. They're going to be completing something called a certificate of medical necessity, which is just a form that the state requires, filling out their diagnosis codes and how long they're going to need the equipment and why they need the equipment, as well as a copy of chart notes or visit notes as anytime that you would go to the doctor, documenting, again, diagnosis and how long we're going to need the equipment and why. The physician plays, honestly, this really the starting factor to that. Sometimes we do see the patients prior to seeing the physician. However, a lot of times the physicians will see the family and the family is going to come in and say, I need a safety bed. The physician for us will write the order or prescription, send it to me. We will then reach out to the family and coordinate a time to set up the evaluation for us to give our input on what specific type of safety bed that the family and the patient need. So the physician is really the starting point for that, or that go through, at least for us. Insurance, of course, plays the biggest factor for funding. These items can be quite expensive. And depending on how many insurance companies the patient and the patient's family has determines on how involved they will be and or need to be. Here in South Carolina, if you had a private insurance like Blue Cross and then a Medicaid secondary, if we would send all the paperwork after we got everything from the doctor and I completed all the forms that I need to, along with the quotes that we've kind of go over for the specific equipment, the insurance company, Blue Cross, here they have 40 days. They would review everything, and if they approve it, terrific. We get it ordered, we move on. If they don't, then if it gets denied for whatever reason, we can either appeal with the primary insurance, and then after that, we can then send to the secondary insurance for hoping for an approval. At that time, we can still add additional information, anything, if anything changes, just to kind of keep the insurance company updated throughout that process. So the insurance is really the key player here, because we, again, for funding, due to the cost of these items, is really leaning on them for these approvals. And depending on the insurance, it's really going to depend on what is going to get funded. At least in our experience, we've worked with some insurance companies in the past where if family calls, I can automatically say, I'm happy to try, but the chances of that getting approved are very slim, just because of the type of equipment and the complex nature of what we work with. Last question, which I've kind of mentioned a few times, is how do we begin the process in obtaining equipment? Several routes to go about that. I have some families that just call around to DME companies like myself, or find us on the internet and just send a little message through our thing that comes to us, and we then reach out to the family. I would say a lot of times it is physician ordered. So if the families go to the doctor, place an order saying we're really having a hard time getting from A to B, or in the going to Target, and we really can't get through Target without having to get a shopping cart and keep the child in the cart and things like that nature. So the doctor could write a prescription for some type of mobility device, not being specific, because the doctor is not going to know exactly what the patient needs as well as what's going to work best for the family. And then that would cover, at least on our end here in South Carolina, to then go out to the home and figure out exactly what we need. Doctor, I would say, is probably the most common that I run into, other than physical therapists. And that can be a physical therapist from an outside clinic and or even a school. A lot of the schools, at least here in South Carolina, have physical therapists in the schools. So they can be processed through that to help with, we've used this in school and we've used this item and things have worked great, to help that process and at the end have safe and functional use of all this equipment in the home to give each and every kiddo as much freedom and individual opportunities that everybody else has throughout their days. The fun part, questions. I know I have gone over a lot and it has probably been relatively quick, but I left a good bit open for questions and concerns. I will say that a lot of times when I do, not necessarily this, but when we do in services with doctors and referral sources and things like that, questions is typically the biggest area of concern.
All right, Seth, a couple questions have been provided. So I'll pose those to you from the Q&A so they're kind of consolidated for you.
Okay.
Also, if anybody has questions as we continue on, please feel free, hit the Q&A button down at the bottom and put your question in there and I'll make sure that it gets to Seth. So one question was, should families always request accessories? And if so, how do they know what's even available?
So depending on what, let me start with, for me in South Carolina and dealing with kids, if we're dealing with adults, I'd probably say no. If we're working with kids, I lean on yes, because you never really know what's going to be needed. I've worked with so many kids over the last 10, 12 years that stuff can change. I remember, for instance, I was working with a young girl about 5 years ago that she needed almost no accessories for her gait trainer specific. She was actually holding on to the frame, which I love. The less accessories that I can give. Then she had a hospital stay for about 2 months, and during that time, everything regressed. Her muscles atrophied quite a bit. She needed other accessories, and in that time, we had to then restart that process to get those other parts. So we had to get forearm prompts and a chest support and things of that nature. Where if it's asked up front, at least moderate accessories, you don't have to get everything. Some of those things come with tarps and things like that. It's not really medically necessary, but the medical function of that device, I would typically always at least ask the insurance for that. We don't need to have duplicates of certain things, but if it's an option for support, is kind of how we pose that, I would absolutely request it, because I always tell our families, even when I'll deliver it, say, we're going to take this off for today. And I hear a week later saying, Seth, just want to let you know, I had to take them out of the closet and put them back on. So all they had to do was make a quick phone call to me if they needed help installing those items, but they had them. Instead of calling me and saying, Seth, we need those items, and it being 3 to 6 months down the line of not being able to use that equipment because something happened that's out of the family's control or the patient's control. As far as knowing what's out there, kind of goes back to where I started in asking. If you work with a DME company that you can tell that just doesn't want to answer the questions, or you can kind of feel given a little pushback for that, I promise there are other DME companies out there. There are so many DME companies. You find someone that you can work well with and have a good working relationship with, and it will be, as far as equipment wise, it would make everything so much smoother. And they'll give you, depending on the state, there may be some states out there that I'm not aware of that they don't do parts like that. But if an option, I always try to do that, just because you never know what's needed from day to day.
Another question was, why do different companies or states only sell or offer certain brands? Is it professional preference, or is insurance regulation or something else at play?
Tough question with the few that I know. Here in South Carolina and there in Georgia, where I did work for a few years, those are not based on brands. You may be told by a durable medical equipment by brand, and sometimes even here in South Carolina, I will specifically say the family will find something online, and it's incredible. In particular, there's a car seat that came out about 6 months ago from Thomas Hilton. It's a Hercules car seat, it goes up to 175 pounds. It swivels. It's absolutely amazing. It costs almost $4,000, and our insurances here in South Carolina don't pay near enough to cover that. So a lot of times you may hear from a DME company saying, we have to work with this product manufacturer. That's more of a DME rule, which, for them to stay in business, it has to be under the cost and things like that. That's more of a DME rule than it would be a state rule, at least the states that I've worked in. The states that I've worked in, they're going to give everything that we've talked about today, from bed to gait trainer, has a code. And that code has a set amount or either a manually priced set amount. And that's going to depend on each item. So I don't have any experience with any state specifically saying you have to use Convade or you have to use sleep safe beds compared to a cubby. However, they may not pay enough for that code to afford a cubby because a cubby costs significantly more. That's absolutely a possibility. But as far as saying it has to be a specific brand, that's not something I've ran into, and I would for sure ask the DME company questions in regards to that.
Wonderful. Another question is, what is your recommendation for bathing a teenage boy about 95 pounds with mobility issues? They have tried adjusting the height chair, but it does not fit in the bathtub very well.
Okay. So what can they answer of what chair they're exactly using now? Was it the height chair?
It doesn't say, it says try the adjusting height chair.
So for a teenager, if this is, we'll go with the standard tub. Riften makes a wonderful product called the Riften Wave. It is, if we need to help with support and angle adjusting, the Riften Wave, they have a new size out, which is their large, and you add a calf panel. I'm 6 foot tall, and it would easily fit me. It does fit in the tub, and you can get something called either a standard tub. You can do a tub transfer bench, a tub base, which basically raises that up. Or if you're limited on space, there is something called, they call it their tub twist system, or CCW. It's basically a large base that you can attach the Riften Wave to, and it actually rotates. So instead of, bathrooms are always, I always tell families, are the most dangerous places for accidents to happen, slips. Everybody's wet, soapy, things of that nature. And if we're working with a teenager, he's going to be, on the heavier side, just because of his age. The Riften will actually turn and face out of the shower or the tub. You can put the child in safe, strap them into the mesh netting, and then you push a little button and they will actually swivel. And while it swivels, it actually rotates to go inside of the tub. So you're not actually leaning over into the tub, which is where a lot of the accidents and injuries that I've ran across occur.
Wonderful. Another question is, I've been battling with my DME after sending all the needed documents for updates on the process. Is there a way to get medical equipment from another supplier if they are not zoned for my area or are out of state?
Out of state is difficult. You're going to run into probably a lot of the national companies. If you're working with a national company, they have locations throughout the country. Like me, for instance, I work in South Carolina, and that's all I work. If you're having issues getting answers or questions, absolutely. Asking, even if you are halfway through that process of waiting to get paperwork or waiting to get an authorization, and you can't even find that out. I have families call all the time. For instance, even, they'll call me and say, Seth, I've been working on this for 6 months to get my son a power chair. And I'm like, okay, well, where are we in the process? And they tell me, and I'm like, okay, well, we should be a lot further along, even with 2 insurance companies, a lot further along than just waiting on quotes or waiting on the paperwork from the doctor, as long as the family is going to the doctor and seeing the required appointments. If you're not getting any answers, any communication back, I would recommend you can do a search for durable medical equipment, or one of my favorite options, if you know what equipment you're specifically looking for, you can actually reach out, and I've had some of our families do this, is reach out to the manufacturer, like Sleep Safe Beds. Every once in a while they'll call us and they say, hey Seth, I got a phone call from somebody that lives in your state and would like some help with a bed. So they pass that on, and then they connect me with the family. So if you're not getting any from the DME, I'd try that. You can also try if you have a case manager. Here in South Carolina, we have a state-funded group that helps a lot of our complex kiddos, but there's several of those, and I assume, and even in Georgia, I know that they had several as well. Let the case managers, that's really where they're to help from, saying, I'm really not getting any answers from my DME equipment. I need to know when I'm going to get this so I can plan on maybe a trip or decorating the room, or even moving. And those are really answers that everybody should be given. So don't feel like you're locked in. Even when people work with me, if things are taking longer than expected, that's always an opportunity. It's nothing that once you're locked in, you can't ever change.
The next question I have is regarding strollers. Could you talk more about what the lightest weight strollers are? What are the options that allow for upright versus slant and reclined? And do they all have the ability to have a tray attached?
So lightest weight, I get that question a lot. If we're just going off strictly off of weight, I would look at the Special Tomato jogging stroller. There comes in, or this Special Tomato EIO push chair. It's the jogging one is a 3-wheel with pneumatic tires. The EIO is a 4-wheel stroller. It does have a standard recline feature with just a tension strap in the back. Comes with a canopy. I believe you can add a tray to it. That is going to be the absolute lightest adaptive stroller out there. Downsides, it is a little small. Kiddos outgrow it pretty quickly. And durability, if you go with the EIO push one, it's not really there. But if you do the jogging stroller with the large pneumatic tires, I have great success with that. I use it a decent amount, but again, you're going to run into the kiddos outgrowing. The next one from you go to there, you're really going to jump into the 29 to 30-ish pound range, depending on size. The drive trotter, that's a good one. I like that one because I keep them in stock. They come out of Atlanta. It's close for me. If you guys are on the West Coast, Convey Cruiser is on the West Coast. It's a great product. I love it. Handle's adjustable. Some of the downsides doesn't come with some of the accessories for free. You have to pay for the under storage. You have to pay for the sun canopy, but then you can get a tray as well. That's the drive trotter and the Convey Cruiser are known as fixed tilt strollers. So when the child is in it, it's going to be always at a fixed angle of typically around 70 to 75 degrees. And that's not something that can be adjusted. From there, you go on to strollers. Convey makes one, the Easy Rider, and I believe actually just came out with one called the Convey Coaster, where you can adjust that recline feature. Adding that feature does add weight, of course, having more metal pieces and more functions. Doing that, you're going to get into the 35, maybe 40, depending on size range. But I think any of those types are going to be very, very well put together products. Convey is a great product. Again, we're on the East Coast, the West Coast. It takes a little while to get to us. So, we kind of take that into consideration, but I still do quite a bit of Conveys. Families, if they don't want to wait, it's great. If you like to go to the beach, the Convey is going to be a better stroller. The wheels are a little bit wider, as long as you stay out of the 18-inch wide, so the teenagers and older. Anything smaller has wider tires in the trotter, so it does a little bit better. And if you like hiking or anything like that. But if it's really something strictly for stores or riding the school bus or something simple like that where it's paved, the drive trotter is one of my favorites. I always tell everybody it's built like a tank, weighs about 29 pounds, but it comes free with the under storage and the sun canopy without any additional cost.
An excellent question here. Someone has asked, can I make multiple claims at once? For example, request a safety bed, a stroller, and a car seat?
Yes. So at least here in South Carolina and Georgia where I work, yes, absolutely. So we'll go to a home if this is the first time I've met the family and they have a 4-year-old. They're just learning that maybe they just got diagnosed and realize that they need this equipment. I will go in, and if they don't have anything, I sometimes will request a stroller, a car seat, pretty much everything we talked about: gait trainer, car seat, bed, all of that, all at the same time. That's never a problem. Sometimes if you run overlying, like needing the bed at home in addition to the travel bed, that may get kicked back due to similar codes, but absolutely not. You shouldn't be a problem requesting all of that all at once. And honestly, through that process, at least if you're working with us, it makes it much easier. Instead of calling me on Monday, let's do the bed, and then the next Monday, because then you would have 5 to 6 claims going through at the same time, and it's just more things to keep track and more things to potentially get lost or be incorrect. So I'd absolutely recommend, if you have an idea of what you need, doing that all at once.
Back to the question about the medical strollers, and you've talked about travel and how much that impacts the kind of a gear that you get. Do you have any tips for keeping medical strollers safe and intact during air travel, especially?
That's tough. I run into that a lot. where we've all seen it. I was on a trip last week where you see the suitcases just being thrown, and they do that with the strollers and or the wheelchairs. I typically recommend, and this is where it gets into where the other board where we mentioned donating old equipment. If you have the ability to keep a backup, I always recommend doing such if it fits at all. Even if it's not perfect and you guys are, people need to travel for a week, I would always recommend taking the backup just because it's going to get thrown. However, I have seen a family, if we do like the Convey Cruiser, depending on the size, if it's a smaller size and or the Drive Trotter, they fit into golf hard suitcases. Again, that's still going to get thrown, but it helps some. But I always recommend, especially if it's something like a stroller that's really used for mobility, especially if it's needed every day, every other day, I always recommend if you have the space in your home to keep a backup, even if it's not perfect and it's old and some things are torn on it. Stuff just happens to DME, to all this equipment. Accidents happen, something on the bus, something on the airline. If at all have that case, I would always recommend keeping a backup. Or what you can do, some DME companies have older strollers. If you have one from, let's say, for instance, you got it from me. Actually had this happen 2 weeks ago. They got a brand new stroller for me. They were flying out to Cincinnati Children's Hospital and they needed something for a week. I have one that we had used as like a loaner while somebody was getting fixed and I said, just take this. And a lot of times the DME companies, if you have a good working relationship with them, will loan you something like that. And they may charge you a small fee. Here's $50, $100, however long you may need it to cover any miscellaneous repairs or breaks that it may need, brakes and things like that of that nature. But I would reach out to your local DME if you are working with one to see if that's something that they either may loan you or rent you for a small fee.
Okay, another stroller question, very important.
Absolutely.
Do you know of a jogging stroller that has an accessory tray?
Depends on size. If you are looking at small sizes, the Special Tomatoes jogging stroller, I believe you may be able to add one. It may come with if you're talking for the parent pushing, it may have one. If you're talking about the kiddo, I do not believe it does. If we're talking for larger kiddos, high school, that nature, there's a brand called Axiom Star. They make 3 and 4 wheel, and they make them. Again, I did one probably 2 months ago that went up to, I believe this child was 5'5", 150 pounds, and I believe you can get accessories for that as well. The tray, if you're talking about for the patient to use, it's going to be a simple, probably like some type of lap tray that would Velcro because these are very, very lightweight strollers. Not really having any firm tubing or hardware to clamp on. But if you're talking about for the adult pushing the stroller, I believe both of those models you can either get that feature for like a cup holder or a phone, or I believe it comes with it. If it doesn't, I recommend to a lot of families, instead of going through, let's say if you got a Convey Cruiser, I hate to say it, but Amazon is a great resource for cup holders, stuff like that, that instead of spending $100 on a cup holder from Convey, Amazon sells them for a wheelchair. They're typically universal and going to cost you $5, $10. I would definitely look there. If you're looking for something specific for jogging, Amazon has great accessories for strollers that are typically universal.
Well, we've reached the end of the questions that have been submitted so far. If anybody has any more, now would be the chance to put them in the Q&A. And then Seth, I'll just give you an opportunity to say kind of any closing thoughts that you had, and then we just have a couple of reminders at the end to go
Absolutely. So I'll end with, if I covered anything, and it's kind of what I tell everybody when I meet them for the first time, or even when I'm working with families over the years, if you have any questions, we just went through a lot in 50 minutes. Throw a lot out there. If you have any questions at all, they have attached my email to this slide, and if you feel free, Katie, to post it anywhere that you need. I'm available email. You have any questions, concerns, even if I can't help you in the state of South Carolina, you just have a question you want to bounce off or you need to borrow something, I'm available. We always try to say that we want to be a resource because there's so many families and patients out there that don't know what exists. And if we can be any help to that, to streamline that process on your half. Let's say if you live in Washington State, if I can help at all to streamline that process so you know when you go into the doctor, you have an idea of what you're talking about or what you're looking for. I'm always available. Give me a day or two, just give me as much information as you can, tell me where we met, and I'm happy to help.
So we had many people thank you for your insights. Some last minute questions. How do you make decisions when bathroom renovations are needed versus a bath chair regarding like a walk-in bath or shower?
A lot of that's going to go on to funding. I would say when I run across the families that have bathroom modifications, if you know it's going to be a permanent home or a semi-permanent home for quite some years and you have the ability and funding to do a bathroom remodel, I would 100% recommend doing it. The items that you can get, going from like the question we had earlier about the standard tub, it really opens up exponentially the options that are available. There's rolling shower chairs, there's tilt rolling shower chairs, there's and so much other items if the bathroom is accommodated properly. And sometimes those modifications may only be removing the door frame. Sometimes that's all it needs. Or making, removing the lip in the shower or having a little ramp to get in the shower. You can get into like a Ripton HTS is a great product. So if you have the ability, I would always recommend doing that. If it's somewhere where you're going to live for a year, it's kind of a lot. But if you're able to, I'd always recommend doing it. But there are other items. We mentioned the Ripton Wave, but there's the Ripton Wave. There's a splashy bath chair. There's a Inspired by Drive makes one to sit in the tub that just goes around the kiddo. Contour bath system. There's a electric bath lift for our teenagers that just too heavy to pick out of the water but like to play in the water. There's really infinite options, but if you have the ability to do a bathroom modification, I would absolutely always recommend that.
And another one that has come in, do you have any suggestions for products that can be used as a high chair to eat in? The Rifton activity chair was declined for this family because the child already had a wheelchair.
Okay. I would start with, again, I don't know where they live, don't want the state that you guys live in. I'd ask why, would be my first leading question. Outside of that, for high chairs, depending on the child's size, there is Special Tomato. If we're looking at a smaller size, they make a height right chair, pretty similar to a high chair. Or you can do what's called a Special Tomato soft touch sitter. That goes up to a size 5, I believe. The kiddo can be pretty large for that, and it has 2 straps around it. If you're sitting at a kitchen table with a back, one strap goes around the back, one goes around the bottom, and then it has a 5-point harness. I love that device as an activity chair for anybody that likes to travel or goes to families for activities and goes out to eat. Because that Rifton activity chair is not something you're going to want to take with you. The Special Tomato is lightweight, and you can strap it to anything that you can put a buckle around the bottom. And then it gives you a 5-point harness for the patient to be safe. And it's very lightweight. I would try that if the Rifton was denied for a reason. But again, that's not something I've heard of here in South Carolina as far as being in the wheelchair at the same time. So my first suggestion would be asking why, other than just hearing that it was because of the wheelchair.
Excellent. All right. We've exhausted all the questions.
That's terrific.
Thank you so much.
I'm always available.
Thank you, Seth.